Hi, welcome back to another episode of Tuba People TV. Puddles and I are in Crofton, Maryland, in the lovely home of Phil Snedecor. Phil, it's so great to see you.
How you doing, Mike? Nice to see you after all these years.
1987, 1988.
A lot of years.
A lot of years back in Chicago.
Great years.
Obviously, Phil needs little introduction. Fabulous trumpet player, and all of my students know of your work because it's a weekly assignment.
Well, I appreciate you adding to my bottom line by having your students buy my book.
Happy to do it. Quality material. But also, when you were in Chicago, you had some studies with Arnold Jacobs. I'm wondering if you can recall any of the... What brought you to Jake initially?
Well, Jake was a great changing force in my life. He basically is the reason I'm still playing the trumpet today. I kind of had a breakdown at Eastman and was a star one day and nobody the next because I was very inconsistent, and I spent a few months with the Dallas Brass and that was the same, and so I decided, well, I'm either going to change professions or go see somebody that can fix me. So I had a teacher in Dallas named Don Jacoby who also had the nickname Jake, and he sat me down in his office and he said, you need to go see the other Jake. And so he did. And right there in his office he made a phone call and said, Jake, this is Jake. I'm going to send you this guy named Phil, and he's having some issues. And so I just basically packed up and moved to Chicago and beat Jake's door down until he saw me. And when he saw me, he said, you don't have too many problems. You just need to go play music and get that one-way street going, the communication street. And so one of the first things he said is, he says, you see that street out there, Wabash Avenue? Just go play on the street.
Just go play in the street. Take your trumpet and go play in the street.
And I didn't know what the hell that meant. I was like, well, what do you mean, go play in the street? I've never done that before. So not 20 minutes later, after I left his studio, I came across this band of trumpet players, a 4-man group called the Brass Factory Brass. And they were players that had worked in the factory at Schulke's making trumpets. And they played at their lunch hour. And they just played for change. And so I said, wow, this is really great. I listened to it for the whole set. And I was like, do you guys ever need anybody? And they said, yeah, we need somebody tomorrow because this guy over here can't be here. And so I was like, okay, I'll play. And so I played with him for, 2 or 3 months, and it was great because I got back into music again.
Wow. So when Arnold Jacobs was advising you to go play on the street, he was wanting you, and you mentioned the one-way street in terms of, what do you think that meant, the one-way street? What was he trying to get?
Oh, he was very specific. You only have one way. It's a one-way street. You can either collect information or impart information. So you're either making a statement or asking a question. And he said that many times with me. So I was asking a lot of questions. I was, every time I played, I was wondering whether it'd be good enough, whether I would miss a note, whether I would, place it in the right place, whether I was going to be in tune. I was asking 1,000 questions every time I played. But nobody ever really expressed it to me that way. So he said, you need to go just make a statement, which is, talk to the people on the street, talk to your audience, impart, musical thoughts. That's what he was all about. And so that's what I did, and it got me out of my slump pretty fast.
That's really good. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody else from Jake's studio being told to go play on the street, but it makes perfect sense.
Well, I was a special case.
So when you were in the practice room, you were definitely not practicing performing, you were practicing rehearsing.
I was analyzing everything, and I was in kind of a bad place. You've heard of writer's block. I was in musician block. I couldn't make music anymore because I was so worried about how to play the trumpet that I couldn't play the trumpet the way I knew I could. So he was very good at kind of getting me out of that and changing the way I thought about playing and what we were doing. Well, what are we doing on the brass instruments? Are we just buzzing our lips, or are we actually communicating something?
Mm-hmm.
So we would play in the Brass Factory Brass. We would play the Barber Seville Overture or William Tell, and we would just play and have a great time. So
I remember Phil and I played in the Millar Brass Ensemble together in Chicago those many years ago, and I remember you sounding good, and you were very highly regarded at Eastman. I remember hearing stories about that. But somewhere along the way, you had just become, I won't say paralyzed by analysis, but getting to that point.
Well, it started out by being paralyzed by too much playing. It was overuse syndrome, which we hear a lot about today. But I was principal in the wind ensemble, and I played split lead in the jazz ensemble, and I played principal in the orchestra when they needed, and I was in the the graduate brass quintet, and I was in everything. And so I'll never forget my last semester there. Barbara Butler had her solo class, which was basically a chance to perform, and I would have to play a Getchell etude because I was so tied up in what I could do. I couldn't do anything. I would just go in and play very simple etudes because that's all I could get out. And so I knew there was more in me, of course, because I, almost had a master's degree, and at that point, and so I decided, well, I really need to really do this or not do it. So that's when I met Jake.
Aside, maybe moving forward past that initial go play on the street lesson, what do you recall from those times with Jacobs, those first few or several lessons?
Well, he talked a lot about back pressure and trying to get as little back pressure as possible. And he talked about how inside oral pressure increases exponentially every octave.
So you're talking about inside the mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you can get a low C to be 0.2 pounds of pressure instead of 0.4, then the octave above that is half, and the octave above that is a quarter. And that was awesome for me, because then I just tried to play with as little back pressure as possible, and that really helped a lot for me. Try to get out of I was very into the pressure forcing syndrome, and I was forcing a lot, so he got me out of that.
Did he hook you up with some pressure measuring device, or what did he do to get you to think more flow, less back pressure?
Well, I think for everybody, he hooked them up to the inspiration spirometer and the flow leader. He's figuring out how much air capacity you had, and I would test out really well on that. He said, "Oh, you've been given a great huge lung capacity, and that's not a problem, and you really need to take all the gifts that have been given to you and make the most of them." And that's kind of when I realized, I just need to get out of my own way. Basically, he got me out of my own way. And the voice, too. I mean, we were talking earlier about the voice. And even if I just hear the voice on the tapes of my lessons.
Jacobs' voice.
Yeah, the Jacobs voice, and it kind of relaxes you. Oh, well, seventh cranial nerve, and, that type of thing. It's just, it's magical almost.
It's true.
So.
Phil, you're still taller than I am.
Only my torso.
Back in 1987. I was hoping that would have changed by now, but evidently not. Do you remember, did he have you buzzing or singing in your lessons?
Sure. Well, he would sing a lot. I'll never forget him sitting next to me and singing along. That the Arvin thing, he goes, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It's somewhere in the middle of it, and he'd go, ba 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 ba, and he'd sing along with me, and he'd conduct, and I could do no wrong. And of course, that studio sounded great anyway. On Michigan Avenue, and so you're in this huge chamber of resonance, and you've got Mr. bass baritone next to you, singing next to you, and he just got you into the right way of communicating.
Yeah.
He got you into playing music rather than worrying about what you were doing with your face. And then I talked about embouchure. I said, "Mr. Jacobs, do you think I need an embouchure, James?" He goes, "Absolutely not." And he took his visualizer and and he put it over here and put it over here, and he'd say, "I can play anywhere on my face. It doesn't matter. The message is here."
So the meat isn't important; it's the music. The music that's important.
There you go.
Wow. What about you being a trumpet player? He was a tuba player. How did that play out for you in terms of what he had to say to you?
Well, most of what he said applied to me and really helped me. He always had this thing of saying, this is a lot of effort and not much air, and this is a lot of air and not much effort. And so it took me a while to figure out that, to get this on the trumpet, you can't necessarily blow copious amounts of air into the trumpet. You have to make it feel like as little back pressure as possible. And really, that was his message to you: is that it has to be as unrestricted as possible. And so it just took a while to kind of figure out how to do that in the trumpet.
As far as your breathing as a trumpet player goes, obviously takes it's a lower flow rate than the tuba. What did he talk about in terms of breath, breathing, that kind of thing?
Well, my main lesson from him was the inhalation, and he would talk about the sound as opposed to getting the tongue in the way and the lips in the way and the teeth in the way. He would have this huge, almost a bass baritone inhalation. I still remember that sound. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, sure.
It had this great sound of wind going across the lips, and so that still helps me. I talk about that a lot with my students, and still hear that sound. So getting as much relaxed air as in as possible. And when you have a very short amount of time to breathe, like in Petrushka or something, get as much relaxed air as possible instead of making that sound, which is so lethal in brass playing. Really getting really fast.
Yeah. So the type of inhalation sets up the type of exhalation.
Exactly.
Did he get in the air, get in lots of air, take in a good breath, and then get rid of it, or how does that work for?
Immediate U-turn of the air. I remember that a lot. No holding. Just breathe, blow. Don't go. None of that. That was poison. It's like immediate. Breathe in time, blow in time, and that helped me a lot. Other than that, what he did was so natural, though. I mean, I always walked out of there feeling like a better player.
Mm-hmm.
All of us as brass players have had lessons where we walk out feeling less than a great player because our teachers kind of beat us up. He never beat me up. He always was encouraging, even when I was playing poorly. He always had something to say that made me feel better about what I was doing.
That's really fantastic. What do you remember from your studies with Mr. Jacobs? And what were the years that you studied with him?
87, 88. Okay. No, 87. Sorry, 86 through 89.
Okay,
actually.
So about 3 years,
yeah.
3 or 4 years. And then what do you pass along to your students now that you often are reminded?
As we were talking about earlier, I learned things from Jake that I don't even realize I learned from Jake. You were asking about my books and how they relate to Jake. Everything that I write in my books is about playing music and not analyzing your deficiency or whatever you're working on or whatever you're trying to fix. It's about imparting music. So one of the reasons I wrote those books is so that you could just have fun and play music and get that communication thing going this way and not this way. You can't listen to yourself and communicate to your audience at the same time. So I feel like there should be a whole host of etudes that encourage you to have fun in your studio, even when there's nobody listening.
I think certainly your low etudes for tuba, not only visually but just the music themselves, is really good, and your adaptation of other composers, your variations on
like
themes
Pines of Rome and stuff like that. Yeah.
Prokofiev 5, they're really great. Do you have any plans to make any more?
Yeah, I'm always writing stuff. I wrote a trumpet concerto for Trumpet and Wind Ensemble not too long ago. I just wrote a thing called the 3 Ps that was inspired by Dave Bilger.
Yeah.
And he always said, the 3 Ps, pictures, pines, and Petrushka. And so I thought, we teach our students to play this all the time, but nobody really has any experience playing these unless they get the chance to play with an orchestra. So I thought, well, why not play it on a recital or a jury? And so I wrote a piano part based on this. And so you start out with pictures, and you go to Pines, and you play all the audition parts of Pines, and then you play Petrushka, and you end up with ba-da-da-ding, ding, ding. But you've got the accompaniment, and so you can actually make this music and be in the piece a little bit without just playing it by yourself. Yeah. Because auditions have become so antiseptic. It's like you're playing these parts, but they're so out of context. Mm-hmm. So I think the more I teach, the more I think about things like that.
You can really bring the music aspect of those excerpts back to them.
Have fun playing it. That's what Jake always told me, is if you're not having fun, don't do this. Why did you get into this in the first place? Are you into this just to put metal against flesh? You're always gonna lose. You've got to just communicate. So that helped me a lot.
Also here in the DC area, you're heavily involved in the Washington Symphonic Brass. And recently in Eugene, on the public radio station, I heard a performance. I don't know if it was a live performance or from a compact disc.
It's probably from a CD. We have
Yeah, it sounded terrific.
6 or 7 CDs out now at this point. We just finished Classic Rock for Brass and Home for the Holidays, our Christmas thing. But we have, Seth mentioned that we had this thing called the Edge that has Rite of Spring and Appalachian Spring and the Shostakovich 8th Piano Concerto, 8th String Quartet arranged for brass.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to do things that are fun. I love to listen to music and discover music and write it for brass.
Well, it's great. Well, before we started this interview, we had a wonderful pork roast dinner prepared by Phil Snedecor. Excellent.
Hopefully you won't get sick.
I hope not. I don't think so. Puddles was a little jealous because he was all wrapped up. He was on the phone with the football team because they're in Arlington, Texas right now, getting ready to take on the Buckeyes.
Oh.
So he missed out, but we'll get you some later, Puddles. But he did ask me to present you with this genuine Tuba People TV metal water bottle as a token of our Thanksgiving for you being part of this project.
That is very nice. I will put that to good use.
There you go. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Mike. Nice seeing you again.
Oh, man. It's great to see you, too. And now back to you.
Okay, so 1 month I was in the final 4 for the Philadelphia second trumpet position to Frank Catarabic. And so I called up Jake and I said, I got to see you because I got to go play like in 2 days. And so he made room for me, which was unusual for Jake because usually it's like, I'll see you in a few weeks. So he kind of slammed me in there and I walk in and I play the list and he gave me some real good pointers. And one of the things he said is, you have to stop thinking like a trumpet player. You have to think like an artist, and that's what they're going to respect, especially in the Philadelphia Orchestra, because they have some of the best strings in the world. And those string players are going to be on the committee, and they're not going to hear trumpet playing. They're going to hear musicianship. And I'm not so confident that's the case today, because they talk a lot about, ease of production and things like that today, and just ease of trumpet playing. But back then, this was, early 90s, late 80s, something like that. They really valued that, and Jake talked about how you've got to play like an artist, and that's what I still try to do today. Hey, you can't be a trumpet player or a tuba player or a trombone player. You have to be a musician first. So he really drove that home, and I still didn't get the job, but that was my fault, not his.
The message was good.
The message was great.
All right. Thanks.